Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from today. And thank you for joining this TechStrong learning experience with Cloudsmith. My name is Tip, and I'd like to welcome you to our TechStrong learning program. This session will be available afterward on demand, and we will also be sending you a link to the recording after we conclude. Please send any questions that you have to the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen and join us in the chat by telling us from where you're tuning in from. Share your experiences, your comments, your understanding of the matter. We want to hear it all from you and engage with you. Any questions that we're not able to get to today, we will follow up with you shortly after the program concludes. We also have a handout available for downloading on the left side in the resources section. Now, let's kick off today's topic, putting your data to work to protect your software supply chain. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have Allison Sikolka, Dan McKinney, and Patty Carey with us today. Allison, can you take it from here?
Yeah, Tip, thank you so much for having us, and thank you to TechStrong for letting us present today. So, like Tip said, I'm Allison Sikolka. I'm VP of Product for Cloudsmith, and I'm joined by Patty Carey, who is a principal engineer here at Cloudsmith and in the office of the CTO, and Dan McKinney, who heads up solutions engineering for Cloudsmith. So all the wonderful prospects and customers who are interested in trying out Cloudsmith, they get to interface with Dan, and he helps make sure that our platform can meet their needs. I'm going to just take down the slides. For today, we're going to have a conversation between me, Patty, and Dan, and then a little bit of a demo of the platform as well. So like Tip said, we're going to chat today about how you can put your data to work to make sure you can ship secure software. Cloudsmith is the leading enterprise-grade artifact management platform. We help customers control, secure, and distribute software at cloud-native speeds. In November, Patty and our CEO, Glenn Weinstein, gave a preview of our new suite of tools around enterprise policy management, and today we wanted to dive back into how policies, data, and artifact management as your control plane can help make you secure your software supply chain. Patty and Dan, thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
I am going to start with a poll. So just to get a understanding of who we've got here with us today, I want to understand if security is a major part of your work day to day. So if you're joining us today, is security something you think about, and securing the software supply chain something you think about day to day, whether it's in your job title or not? So I'll leave that open while we get started here. Software supply chain has been something the industry's talked about for a while. I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about why you think software supply chain is still relevant today and how that conversation's changed. So Patty, I'm curious, as a principal engineer at Cloudsmith, but also just as an engineer shipping software, what do you think's changed about the conversation around software supply chain in the past few months?
I'm not sure about the past few months, but over time, it's definitely become a bigger factor, and I hear more people talking about it. It used to be that you got the majority of your software from trusted vendors or from trusted open source projects like Linux distributions, where they had a level of quality that they attempted to maintain, and so there was a small group of people that were providing your software, and you could do a reasonable job of enumerating and knowing what you're shipping to production. That's all changed in recent years. Developers are pulling more and more software from more and more third parties, written by people they've never had contact with, written by authors that they don't know, they don't know who they are or where they're from or why they're writing the tools that they're writing. So it's just exploded. A small JavaScript app now can have tens of thousands of dependencies, and it's just an increasingly difficult challenge to manage that and keep on top of it. Whether you're a large enterprise or a small one-person shop, you're shipping probably, more than half of the software you're shipping to your users is going to be written by someone else.
Yeah, that's great. Dan, how has the conversation you're having with customers changed in the past few months around software supply chain and shipping secure software?
Yeah, I find it has changed over the last year, let's say, but increasingly in the last few months, there's just an increased awareness of the risk. Even if a lot of organizations don't yet know what the perfect solution looks like, they know that they want to take more action. And sometimes even I speak to organizations who already have some tooling in place to help them with this, but they don't feel like they are leveraging that tooling in the most effective way. So there is definitely an increased awareness of software supply chain security and its importance, and the problems associated with not paying enough attention to that. But I still feel that there is a sort of an error of how do we do this best? What are the best practices? What are the best tools that are available? What does that look like? So I find there's uncertainty about that among organizations, but certainly there's no shortage of awareness that they need to start doing things better and taking action.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is a lot of talk about shifting security left. What does that mean to the two of you? What do you think that means, and how should organizations interpret that and change how they're doing things internally?
Um, I'm a skeptical, curmudgeonly engineer at heart, and I hear terms like shift left, and people I think wonder what that means. But really, in my mind, all that means is discovering problems and issues in your supply chain or your software as early as possible in the process. You know, I want to know that my package has a vulnerability or that there's a bug in my code as soon as I write it, as soon as I run npm install, as soon as I run pip install, because that's the time at which it's going to be quickest for me to fix. I notice an issue, I choose a different dependency, I write my code in a different way. As we get further along the path to production, whether it's in CI or it's in a staging environment or in production itself, bugs and issues, vulnerabilities, they get harder to fix because you have to go right back to the start. So shift left's really just about presenting issues and giving users information as early in the process as they can possibly get it so that they can course correct quickly without having to put project timelines or your wider goals at risk.
Dan, does that resonate with you?
I think
Can't hear for some reason, Dan.
Oh, okay. Oh,
There
can you
we
hear
go.
me now? Oh, okay, right. I don't know what happened there. Yes, I was just saying, it does resonate with me that when you talk to enterprises, of course, their primary concern is that the later that you find a problem or a bug, the more expensive it is to fix. So if something gets all the way to production, the cost, it really is exponential. Like it's dramatically increased. So shift left to me just means exactly like Patty said, find problems sooner, right? Find problems earlier, because they're not just easier to fix, it's more cost effective. So that is a way that enterprises have to think. That is the way they have to think. So it does become very, very expensive the later that you find a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think another area that's of interest to folks who are starting to consider software supply chain security and how they might incorporate that into their workflows is how they balance that with helping developers still ship fast. So how have you heard organizations think about the idea of balancing rapid development with robust software supply chain security?
I can probably speak to that one directly. So there is a balance between um effectively finding and fixing problems and actually introducing friction and blocking engineers and developers. And that's the last thing that people want to do. Uh, the conversation I have a lot is that people want uh, better security, they want better processes, but they don't want to actively break workflows, break builds, and set people back in time on the path. So that's a struggle. That is a struggle because it is a balancing act. There isn't a perfect solution there. There will be some elements of slowing things down, but it needs to be measured. And of course, one of the solutions is automation, right? So to lean more heavily into automated policies, automated checks, and also to have that exception path as well. So you don't have a hard block that is, unsurmountable. There needs to be that route to, negotiating an exception path there as well, which of course brings in things like auditability and traceability and visibility in general. That's all very important there. But there's no question it's a balance. It is a balance. I don't think we can perfectly protect against all vulnerabilities, all security issues, and cause absolutely zero impact on anybody that's developing software. The question is, how do you minimize it? And that's the challenge.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about Cloudsmith and our enterprise policy management product that we've been working on. Before we get there, I'm curious a little bit, when you think about software supply chain security, is that just vulnerability management, or what does software supply chain security mean to you when you think about that concept? Patty, maybe I can have you answer that question.
Yeah, vulnerability management's a huge part of it. Organizations, security teams are really concerned about software vulnerabilities, and like I said before, the more third-party software you're using, the more vulnerabilities you have to be concerned about. They could be first-party dependencies, they could be somewhere deep in a nested dependency tree. So that's always going to be important, but that's only part of it, right? There, you've got license management. Your organization might only allow certain types of open source license into your product for legal reasons, or it could be that you want to know where your software is coming from. Maybe you've got approved vendors or approved projects that you'll allow to ship into production. So it's an amalgamation of a whole bunch of things. It's about knowing exactly what you're shipping and making good decisions around that. So yeah, vulnerability is a huge part for sure. Like it's the thing that customers and users talk to us about the most. It's often the starting point for a conversation about supply chain security, but it's often then a jumping off point. Well, we know we're now managing our vulnerabilities. What's next in the pipeline? Licenses? Is it software quality? Is it traceability and provenance? It's all of these things put together.
Yeah. I think we talk a lot about those pillars of control, secure, and distribute. And once you get all your software artifacts in a single source of truth, just the visibility and observability you can have over that is a good starting point before you get into that. How do you make sure the package quality is what you need it to be as well? But just being able to have everything in one place, have observability over that, and start to apply controls is step one to being able to have that secure software supply chain. I'm going to try my hand at another poll. So I'm curious if folks listening have experienced a software supply chain breach. So that could be a malicious package, like Patty was talking about, a leaked authorization token. You can also experience the case where upstream package is removed from a public registry. So I have that poll open, and we'll let folks jump in there and give us their feedback. So transitioning a little bit from what is software supply chain security and why does it matter, and into Cloudsmith's approach to helping solve some of these problems for our customers. Patty, you're the architect of enterprise policy management, and this product actually came out of a hackathon that Cloudsmith had a few months back. We had two themes of our hackathon. One was creating wow moments or moments of delight for our customer, and then the other one is basically what this webinar is titled, which is how can we help our customers put their data to work for them. I'd love to hear a little bit about how enterprise policy management does that. How do we help customers harness data to get control and secure their software?
Yeah, totally. So, I guess one of the things I think that's really core to this is that an artifact management platform is kind of core to most software supply chains. You have to download dependencies from somewhere, and in a lot of orgs, everything flows through the artifact manager. And so there's a natural choke point there where we can control software as it enters an organization. And by virtue of that fact, the artifact manager in Cloudsmith, in this case, knows a lot about the software that's flowing through our system. We have a lot of data about the packages, the dependencies, the software that our users are using. And over time, we build up this huge knowledge graph of, absolutely everything there is to know about your software and how you're shipping it and where it's being used, who it's being used by, where it comes from. And so the idea there was that we have all this data. How do we let you use that data to make meaningful decisions to protect your software supply chain? So that's kind of where it started. And Enterprise Policy Manager is really just the name we've given to an engine that we've built, which allows you to make decisions against all of that data. So we want to make everything we know about your software available to the users to make the decisions that they need to make. Those decisions are going to be different for every organization. Everybody has similar needs. Everybody wants to block critical vulnerabilities, but every organization is different. Every developer is different, and they all have slightly different requirements. And we needed a platform that could not only solve the 80% common case, but also meet the needs of those really exacting users that had these really complex and niche policies that it probably wouldn't make sense as a standalone product feature, but this is something we absolutely have to be able to accommodate if we want to be serious about helping users protect their supply chains.
Yeah, so we're going to get a demo of enterprise policy management here in a little bit from Dan. But before we do, just I guess to reiterate what Patty said, this policy engine, it lets you take all the data that Cloudssmith knows and all the data that we enrich packages with to create robust policies around what packages can and can't be used within your organizations. Patty, I'm curious a little bit about some of the technical considerations that went into building enterprise policy management. So can you share a little bit about some of the technical considerations we had to make?
Yeah, totally. So the goal here is to allow, like I said, allow users to make decisions based on any of the data that we have. And in some cases, that's a lot of data. So really, the challenge is making that data available quickly at the right time to allow the decision to be made. So there's a lot of moving data around, and ultimately we needed a language and a tool to enable people to write these complex policies. So whatever it is they need to make decisions on. We chose Open Policy Agent to do that. It's a pretty standard tool. A lot of organizations use it already, managing things like Terraform compliance or compliance in the Kubernetes clusters. And so part of the thinking there was that we want to meet users where they are. Software supply chain security is hard, it's complex. We don't want to be introducing tons of new concepts and tools that people have to learn and figure out, just to do this. We want to meet our users where they are. And want to lean on the wider open source community, the wonderful community around Open Policy Agent, all the tutorials, all of the answers on Stack Overflow, everything. We want to stand on the shoulders of giants in that sense. And Open Policy Agent's been great for us. It's fast and it's flexible. Users can write policies that do almost anything. From simple blocking vulnerabilities to the silly example I always give is, blocking packages by man named Dan, written on Tuesdays in Belfast. And, I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but you can. And so it's really fit in well with our platform. We feed all the data that we have in. We let users know what shape that data is in, what data is available, and then they can just go off and write their policies. So it's not that we always want users to have to write those complex policies. We've got work going on around templated policies and managed policies that Cloudsmith manages for you, so that you never even really need to know it's Open Policy Agent. You just click a few buttons, tell us what you want to block, and we'll do it. But we thought that escape hatch was really important, so users can write their own policies and can enforce their unique requirements where they need to.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I think it's really great to just sort of to emphasize again that it's not just the policy engine, though the policy engine is great. It's also about the data and making sure all that data is available to that engine at the right time, and all the considerations that have gone into designing a great experience around that. And also observability. So making sure that you can see all the decisions and understand all the decisions that that engine is making on your behalf, and making that observable as well. Dan, I'm curious, we've been in early access for a little bit. What are some of the types of policies or the data that folks have been interested in as you've talked through enterprise policy management through these proof of values?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alison. So the short answer is all kinds, all kinds. Organizations are incredibly inventive, and they also have unique requirements. So no two organizations are the same. Now, of course, Patty said this earlier, the kicking off point is always vulnerabilities. The kicking off point is always, I want to block CVEs, I want to block certain CVSS scores, I want to block certain scores from certain vendors. Vulnerabilities are the kicking off point. And that's effectively, use case number one for policies. But I've heard all kinds of extensions on that. So some organizations are interested in blocking packages from a specific vendor. So they may want to block packages from a competitor. They may have a legal compliance requirement that they're not allowed to use packages from a certain source. So that's more to do with just their own internal policies. There's licenses, like Patty mentioned. That's a very popular one, which has nothing to do with vulnerabilities, but just that they, again, have legal or compliance requirements that they're not allowed to use specific open source licenses. Even things like package freshness as a term. So how new is a package? How new is a version? Organizations frequently want to let a package bake for a while in the community before they then take it into their software. So that's a package quality metric for them, and may not be for someone else. Some of other organizations have the opposite. They want to be on the latest and greatest and block older packages, so that both sides of the coin there. Essentially, if you can think it, some organization will want to implement a policy that enacts on that. And that's why it has to be so flexible. That's why the actual amount of data that we can make available to the policy engine essentially has no bounds. And there's no downside to making more data available to the policy engine. It just means that you have more options. And I would almost say there's always an organization out there that will have, additional data requirements. That's why it has to be such a flexible engine, really.
Yeah, thanks. One last question before we jump into the demo. Maybe Patty, it'd be good to answer this. How can customers ensure that the policies they're creating are effective and adaptable to emerging threats?
It's a hard problem. It really is. There's no way, really, I think, to take a human out of the loop there. You need to know what policies you want to enforce to be able to enforce them. That said, key to keeping secure as we go forward is that the data that we have isn't static. It's continually changing. We're continuously ingesting data from both our own system, the code and the packages that people upload into Cloudsmith, but also from external sources. Whether it's data like from OpenSSF scorecards or from the source repositories themselves. And part of our policy engine is reactive in that sense. So every time the data changes, policies get reevaluated. So it means that if a new CVE is discovered, if the maintainer of a package is different the next time you pull it. Say there's a new version and the maintainer's changed, you know, every change, every new piece of data all gets fed into the same policy engine. And so you can be sure when you write a policy or when you're using one of our managed policies that it's always being evaluated against the latest data and the latest sort of intel that we can pull in from the wider ecosystem.
So what we're looking at the moment, folks, is Cloudsmith's classic policies. And this is really was the genesis of why we built enterprise policy management. I can create policies in Cloudsmith that say block high or greater severity CVEs, right? Or block specific licenses, right? I can do all that today. That's easy to do. But that's in some ways overly simplistic, okay? So we don't really have a lot of control there, and we're certainly not leveraging all of the data that Cloudsmith knows about packages. So of course, packages have a lot of metadata, all kinds of metadata. I have a repository that I created for this webinar today. And when we look at some packages, I'll just pick any example package. We know a lot about it. We know the license. We know when it was downloaded. We know the source. We know the version. We have information from the README file. There is a lot of information about packages in Cloudsmith. And that information increases over time, because associated with that, we also have all our usage information, who the uploader was, who published it, what tags have been added to a package. If you're publishing packages from CI builds, you can add additional tags like the host or the environment. There's a lot of scope for package metadata. So the idea behind Enterprise Policy Manager was to allow you to leverage this metadata and make more sort of complex decisions. So as Patty explained, we decided to base this on Open Policy Agent. And of course, the way you write policies in Open Policy Agent is in Rego. So I'll show you what a Rego policy looks like. So this is a very simple Rego policy, and it really is only looking at the CVSS score for a package. Just a nice simple use case. Just checks that there's a fix available and that the CVSS score is greater than 7. That's all. Now, in this input field here, I have an example of all of the data that Cloudsmith holds about a particular package. And you can see that it really is, extensive. So everything from the package format to the license, Cloudsmith specific data, like things like when a security scan was completed. So there's a lot of sort of custom Cloudsmith data here as well. Also, all the information about the security scan results, the CVSS scores, the NVD scores, vendor scores like Red Hat, all the links to all of the vulnerability data as well. So there is an absolute wealth of data that we can then leverage with our Rego policies. Now, I evaluated this policy just locally here, and you can see that it is, ignoring a specific CVE, and it has been a match because this package does have a CVSS score, greater than 7. So that's a nice simple policy example. But where can we take this? How can we expand upon this? Well, just as another example, here's a much richer policy. So this policy takes things into account like time-based threshold for the vulnerabilities. It has additional exclusions for its allowed CVEs. And it even does things like, look, is there a fix? Does it exceed a max score? Will you apply the time-based filtering as well? All in one policy. So sort of your imagination, or the sky is the limit as far as you want to take these policies. And of course, because these policies are code, you can version them and you can manage them just like you do any other code. That's very much like infrastructure as code with Terraform, or even source code itself. That's the beauty of codifying things in a programmatic way like this, is you can track changes to them, you can roll them back, you can roll them forward, you can really get a much better control over these policies than you can just sort of drag and drop. So again, same sort of information available to the policy. And again, this was a match because it is older than 30 days and it does exceed the CVSS score. And we can print out a nice debug message, a nice reason for the policy match as well. So OPA is the engine. Rego is the language that you're going to use. That's what gives you the flexibility and the power. But really, the real magic is in the data. That's the truth. This data set will expand over time. This is what we have today, but the idea is that this is sort of open-ended, and you can add more data to the policy engine as you get more data sources, as Cloudsmith gets more data sources. That's the idea. So now let's actually do something with it in the platform and use it for something real. And this is genuinely a live demo, folks. I haven't overly pre-prepared this, so if it goes horribly wrong, I will blame Alison for asking me to do a demo at the last minute. Let's try this. So today in Cloudsmith, the Enterprise Policy Manager, which is in early access, is API based. So we will build a user interface for it. We will integrate it into the UI of the product. But actually, a lot of Cloudsmith customers today, they use client tooling like pip install and Docker pull to interact with Cloudsmith. They use our API. So we are API first. That's the way we are. And by developers for developers, as we said. So here's the API endpoints just for Enterprise Policy Manager. There's hundreds of other endpoints for the rest of the Cloudsmith platform. This is just for Enterprise Policy Manager. So if I was just to grab in my demo workspace, if I was just to get all of the policies, I'll show you what that looks like. So I only have a single policy in my demo workspace, and it is the quarantine and tag CVSS scores greater than 7 in a repo called GitHub Actions. Okay. So the question there naturally raises, well, what does quarantine and tag mean, right? What is that? Because this is just the policy that gets matched. Well, those are policy actions, okay? And we have another endpoint to show you what policy actions mean. So this is my workspace. This is my policy identifier, my ID for my policy that we just saw. So if I get the actions, you'll see that this policy has 2 actions that it takes when it has a match. One is to quarantine a package, and one is to add a package tag. Okay. So quarantined in the Cloudsmith platform is a state of a package. That essentially means that the artifact is blocked. It cannot be fetched. So if you had a developer that wanted this package, they would not be able to fetch that package. Or if you had a CI build that needed this package, it would not be able to get that package either. Now, it is different from the package not being found, right? The package does exist, but it's in the quarantine state. So, and that's important later when we see what happens. So that's an example of a policy and an example of some actions. Now, Alison, you mentioned this earlier. These policies can take all kinds of actions. So tagging a package and quarantining a package are just some of them. You could move packages, copy packages. You could take additional actions. Really, it's quite extensive. So you need a way to be able to test these policies before you let them sort of take their actions on your artifacts. So of course, we have also built a simulation endpoint. You can simulate any package, any policy, and you can see the results, whether it does a match or whether it does and doesn't match anything. So you get a chance to do a dry run. So that's really important. And I think equally as important is the decision logs for a package. So you need to, or for a policy, you need to be able to see, why did a policy trigger as a match? You need to go and look at all the conditions that you specified in your Rego and see which conditions actually matched. And that's what we call our decision log. So there's being able to create policies, take actions. There's being able to simulate or dry run those policies. And then there's being able to see why a decision was taken. And that's end to end in terms of writing and managing policies. So like I say, API based today, there will be a UI coming. let's do something real. At the minute, I was just using the API Explorer. So I have a little GitHub project here, and you'll see that this little GitHub project, it builds a little Python project. It just does pip install against a Cloudsmith repository called Webinar. We did look at the Webinar repository earlier. I have it here. I have a lot of packages in this Webinar repository, probably 20 packages. I've used it today, got some downloads. So I will run this GitHub action and we will see what happens. Now, before I do that, I'll show you what the previous runs looked like, so you can see that everything was sort of working. So I ran this earlier today, and this fetched all of the dependencies from the requirements file, all from the Webinar repository in Cloudsmith, and it built the Python project, and it was successful. So that's in many ways the happy path. So there was no policy violations here, nothing to trigger anything in Cloudsmith. That was fine. Now, if I was to go back to my project and I was to make a change, if I was to deliberately specify an older version of a package like that, I'll pin it to 2.6.0, and I'll just commit it straight to the main branch for the demo. I love to live dangerously, as the saying goes. And that will kick off a new build. So GitHub Actions is running again. It's reaching out to the same Cloudsmith repository. It's going to start fetching all of the dependencies. Here it goes. So it's fetching away, and we've authenticated. We're downloading everything. This time it wasn't successful. It wasn't good. It failed. It failed with an error. It couldn't download the requests 2.6.0 package. And actually the error code is correct. 403 means forbidden. So I'm not allowed that package. The package does exist and I have authenticated correctly, but I'm not allowed that package. So when we go back to Cloudsmith and we look for the request package in my repository, you'll see it right here. It has been flagged as being quarantined because it was tagged by my policy. So that policy that I said, CVSS score greater than 7, please block that package. Now, is that actually the case? Does this package really have a CVSS greater than 7? So Cloudsmith has analyzed it. It does tell me that it has a high severity package, and we provide the link straight through to the NVD in this database where you can see it actually is a 7.5. So it did use the package metadata from Cloudsmith, used the result of our security scans, it enacted the policy, it matched the policy, and it took the correct actions that I defined. So in many ways, that's a really sort of obvious example, right? That you can be a lot more fine-grained with that. And you can, quarantining is only one action. Personally, I think flagging, notifying, those are the sort of actions that you want to take at a first step. And maybe you want to take that for lower severity CVEs. Maybe you only want to quarantine criticals, CVSS 8 or 9. But this is a sort of driving home the point of what can be done. So that's my take on that, really. But you have the flexibility to do it. Certainly, flagging, notifying has to be part of this, but also now that this package has been quarantined, being able to release it is also part of this. There has to be an exception route. So maybe there isn't a fix available. Maybe you have a critical workload that you're going to make a 20-day, 7-day vulnerability mitigation that you allow, and you have an SLA for mitigating vulnerabilities. There has to be a way to release a package. So you can do that. And all of those actions, again, are recorded in the audit log, the life cycle of that package, who released it from quarantine, when it was released. So you need to have that escape route as such as well. So I'll stop there, Alison, just because I don't want to overload our time. I know we have a few things to talk about, but please, anybody has questions in the chat, please fire them in there. I'm happy to answer those questions as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that demo. And like Dan said, if you want to drop in any questions you have for any of us here, Dan, Patty, or I, please feel free to do that, and we'll get to them at the end. Just to recap a little bit of what we saw there. So We started the chat by talking about the importance of getting control of your software and controlling your software supply chain. And by having that single source of truth for all your software assets, you get to a really interesting place where you can now start to apply control and make sure that the software assets that are in use with your organization meet your own internal requirements. And the Cloudsmith solution helps you do that first by giving you that central single source of truth for all those assets, then by bringing observability over all those assets and all of the data around those assets. Cloudsmith also helps enrich the data we know about your software through third-party sources of data, such as security advisories, package quality, EPSS scores for exploitability. And then we take all of that data and we put it into a policy engine that's built on policy as code so that you can build flexible policies that meet your organization's needs. And throughout all that, we're thinking about the user experience. We're thinking about observability. We're thinking about how you can have control over what's happening even around those policies as well. So I'm curious. We've sort of given you the problem and how Cloudsmith can help solve it. But one question I would have if I was listening to this is, how do I get started? So how do I start on the path of securing my software supply chain? Patty or Dan, do either of you have thoughts on that?
I'll maybe let Patty go first on this one. I do have thoughts, but I'll let you go first, Patty.
I think it's there are two big parts of the problem. It's knowing what you have and what you want to do. So I think you really need to have that visibility into what it is that you're actually building, shipping to your users. And a Cloudsmith or a platform like Cloudsmith really helps with that. You can see everything that's flowing through. You can see all the vulnerabilities. You can see all the metadata that we have. And then it's about deciding, just making a plan and figuring out where you want to start. Like we've talked about a few times, vulnerabilities is a really good jumping off point because almost every organization has some sort of policy around vulnerabilities, from the simple, yeah, don't allow any of them, to the more nuanced, we're going to allow low severity vulnerabilities for a couple of weeks to allow teams to catch up. And so once you know what your requirements are, you can start to build policies around them. And I think that's the important part. You need to know what you want to do. You need to know what it is that both that you want to do and that you're legally required to do. If you're a one-person indie dev shop, you probably don't have too many requirements, but you'll have opinions and preferences, and you should be able to encode that in a policy manager. Or if you're in a highly regulated industry, you're going to have binders full of legal requirements that you have to meet. And so both ends of the spectrum there, it's about knowing what it is that you want to do.
So I have one last poll for the audience, and we can jump into some questions. So if you're tuning into the webinar, I'm curious if your organization has a plan for securing your software supply chain. So I'll put that up there, and then I'll take a look at the chat. Okay, so somebody just asked the question we just chatted about, where should we start? Another question in here is, why OPA and why not one of the other solutions? Patty, do you want to chat to that a little bit?
Yeah. So there's lots of good solutions. We looked around at a few of them. We looked at OPA and we looked at Amazon's Cedar language as well. They use that for authentication policies. OPA fit our needs the best, and we felt fit the needs of our typical customer. Our typical customers are platform teams, DevOps teams, security teams, and OPA is already quite common in a lot of the platforms they'll be running and managing. So whether it's Kubernetes, Terraform, or other third-party SaaS tools, OPA and Rego are pretty ubiquitous at this stage. And so we wanted to leverage that ubiquity. And are there things other tools do differently or that might be an advantage for us? Absolutely. But we felt that the benefit of OPA's ubiquity really played in our favor here. and really would help our users onboard quickly, sort of with just that familiarity, you know. OPA is also really flexible. It lets you run it in a bunch of different modes, whether it's as a library, as a service, as WebAssembly compiled binaries. So the Cloudsmith platform's pretty huge. We have a large fleet of servers that process artifacts and extract metadata from them. We want to run policies there. We have a large package delivery network built on top of our CDN, and we want to enforce policies there. So OPA's deployment model really worked for us and allows us to apply policies at the right part of our stack in a way that works for us and our users. So, we want to be able to apply policies right at the edge of our network so that they get applied quickly and that you get answers quickly and don't have to wait, travel around the world to get an answer.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I think everybody that I've shown the Enterprise Policy Manager to has been very glad to see that it's OPA based, that they're already using OPA in their enterprises somewhere or other. So they have some familiarity there, and there's less of a hurdle to adoption. So generally, it has been very well received that was the choice that we made. Yeah.
Another question in here. What are some examples of additional data that Cloudsmith makes available to the policy engine? One of you want to grab that?
Yeah, so I can start there. So just as we've told you that vulnerabilities is a good place to start for your policies, that's also where we started. So we have a security scanning backend, and we pull in all of the raw security scan data, the CVEs, CVSS scores from multiple different upstream sources. So, whether it's Linux distros or NVD or GitHub, we have all that security data, and then we enhance that. I don't know if the audience is familiar with Cloudsmith Navigator, but that's a platform that allows you to go and check various aspects of a package quality. You can see how well it is maintained, how often it's released, those kind of things. OpenSSF scores or OpenSSF scorecard scores. So there are sort of emerging standards and sort of ongoing efforts around the ecosystem, especially within the CNCF and OpenSSF communities, around trying to define what it means for a package to be good or bad. And so we want to leverage all of that work as well. So, we pull in OpenSSF scorecard data, and if you want to say, I only want packages that are well maintained, that's something we want to be able to enable with our policy engine.
Great. Well, that's what we've gotten in for questions. So we can wrap it up there. Patty and Dan, I want to thank you both for taking the time today to help blow off Cloudsmith Enterprise Policy Management and chat through how Cloudsmith can help customers take advantage of the data to secure their software supply chain. If you're interested in learning more about Cloudsmith and our enterprise policy management, please reach out. We'd love to give you a demo. We can give you a customized demo and to get you in for a trial so that you can kick the tires on our platform yourself. I also wanted to highlight a few upcoming events where you can find Cloudsmith. So we will be at DevOps Live, March 12th and 13th in London. We will be at SRECon in Santa Clara, California at the end of March. And we will be at KubeCon Europe in the beginning of April in London, April 1st through the 4th. So if you're interested in meeting the Cloudsmith team, you can find us at those events. And if you're interested in learning more about our platform or about enterprise policy management, you can reach out to us and we will set up a demo. Tippy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Before we close out, please click on the survey in the resources section, as your input is invaluable to us. Your feedback does go a long ways here, so please do let us know about that or any other closing or final thoughts that you've got. Once again, you will receive an email in your inbox shortly after we conclude today's session with the link to view it. I would like to thank Allison, Dan, and Patty for taking the time to join us. It's been a pleasure having you. Thanks for joining this TechStrong learning experience. Looking forward to seeing you all again. Have a great day.